the fair was also responsible for what would become Disney's most famous attraction.
Walt came in one day, we had a meeting with him, and he said, you know, there's one more piece of real estate left at the World's Fair that's available. He says, I think maybe we'll get that. And there was only about 6 of us sitting in the meeting, and he said, I've got an idea for a little boat ride. We all kind of looked at each other like, ooh, has he lost it?
It's a Small World quickly became a fair favorite.
This magical exhibit called It's a Small World, I think I was at just the right age as an 8-year-old girl to be absolutely captivated by the magic that Disney is able to produce. It was almost just in my mind like a dream when I went through that exhibit.
When you get in that little boat in the small world, you're greeted by Goofy, Mickey Mouse, Daisy, and they're all waving at you, telling you to have a good time. And you would go in there and you'd listen to the music, which is hypnotic.
It's a world of laughter, a world of tears. It's a world of hopes and a world of fears. There's so much that we share.
Everybody that would leave that exhibit, that pavilion, would leave happy and sing the song.
It's a small world after all. It's a
Big breakthrough, I think, was in It's a Small World with the boat ride, because all of a sudden we were handling over 3,000 people an hour. And if you go back to the history of Disneyland, the first 6 years or so before we started working on the fair, you could handle maybe up to 2,000 people an hour. And on the Jungle Cruise, it enabled the Pirates of the Caribbean attraction, which opened in Disneyland 1967.
As he had with the Carousel of Progress, Disney brought It's a Small World to Disneyland. However, a key icon of the fair didn't make the trip.
Rolly Crump and I have been friends for over 55 years, and I always admired his style. He has a very stylistic approach to doing things. And of course, the Small World Tower of the Four Winds was sort of Rolly's gigantic structure, hood ornament of Rolly type of ideas. And of course, when the tower got built, it was all the parts were twice as thick because it had to be for structural engineering reasons and wind loads. Rolly was very upset with it, but to everybody else, they didn't know his model was that thin. So when they saw the big full fat tube tower, they thought that was fantastic.
Oh, I hated it.
You know, like all our other exhibits, we checked the real tower out carefully before shipping it to New York. And here's how it looked when Roland and I went down and gave it a final dry run.
We subcontracted to a company, engineering company here in Los Angeles, and we built it here in LA. And I had to drive Walt down to take a look at it, and which we did. And Walt turned to me and says, well, what do you think, Rolly? And I thought, it's a piece of crap. And he said, Rolly, it can't be a piece of crap. He says, it cost me $250,000. And he loved it.
When the fair ended, there was a difference of opinion on what to do with the kinetic sculpture.
My boss, Dick Irvine, calls me in and he says, Rolly, you're going to put you on the hot seat. And I said, what? So I went to the office, and all the vice presidents were in the office. And so he said, Dick Irvine said, we don't want to bring the Tower of the Four Winds back to Disneyland. And I said, well, neither do I. And they said, well, we want you to tell Walt. Now, get this. I'm a guy in a pair of Levi's and a sweatshirt, and here's all the vice presidents in their ties and suits, and they don't want to tell him. They want me to tell him. And then finally at the end, Walt said, is that it? And I said, and I used to grab his coattail when he'd sit next to him, and I said, Walt, I said, about the Tower of the Four Winds, and that's when he'd frown, and the eyebrow would go up, and he says, what about the Tower of the Four Winds? And I said, I don't want to bring it back. He says, what do you mean you don't want to bring it back? I said, I don't. You know how I feel about it. I don't want to bring it back. He went to every one of those guys and said, are you concerned about the cost of bringing it back to the finance guy? Well, a little bit, but not really, And then he went to one of the engineers. Are you worried about engineering, the safety of it? A little bit, but no, it's okay. So they were backpedaling with everything that he said, But then they would admit that they were a little concerned. Well, at that point in time, Walt knew that I had been set up. You know, I mean, the man was absolutely brilliant. So he said to him, he says, okay, we won't bring it back.
What happened to the tower after the fair ended has become a thing of urban legend. Some believe it was dumped in nearby Flushing Bay. Most likely, it was sold as scrap and melted down. After some time in storage, It's a Small World opened at Disneyland. The same dolls and animals and song that enthralled fair visitors were entertaining guests again.